Hi, friends. Welcome to the Friends of Franz podcast. In this safe space, we are favored in each episode with the presence of an expert guest from different fields and specialties as we learn about their life journeys, their successes, possible regrets, and realizations, their work, why they do what they do, and even their life outside of work. In here, we tear down common myths and misinformation with up-to-date, evidence-based science and data simplified for anyone to digest. We don't shy away from topics that can sometimes be polarizing or taboo. We normalize the humanization of healthcare and its workers, and we promote the importance of self-care and safeguarding your mental health. Please keep in mind that the conversations in this podcast are for educational and informational purposes only. They are not implied or intended to be a substitute for professional medical diagnosis, advice, or treatment. Please always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare providers regarding a medical condition. Are you ready? Let's go! Hello. Happy Friday again, everybody. You know what that means. It's another Friends of Franz Day. It's a new episode uploaded for you this morning. It is December 30th, which means Hanukkah, which ended on the 26th of December, which was also Kwanzaa, and Christmas, which happened on the 25th, are finally over. So I hope you had a great holiday dinner or meal or just spending time with your family and shopping and giving gifts. I hope you had a great holiday weekend. But we have another holiday coming in about 2 days, and it is the holiday that will be the precursor to the other holidays for the rest of the new year. You got that right. It's going to be 2023. Another year. A new year. Can you believe it? I'm very curious how your 2022 went. How was your past year? Was it full of fun and new experiences, joyful time with yourself adventuring or with your family and friends, or possibly a not so happy year? Well, whatever it may be, I hope that we all have a great new year ahead filled with happiness and new adventures and more opportunities and just more time to enjoy the world around us. With the new year comes also new resolutions. New year, new me, as they say. Do you have anything in mind that you want to do that's new for the next year? All I know is that I'm so excited to travel, some few places outside of my usual bubble here in New York City or my usual travels to LA. So I'm looking forward to that. And speaking of the new year, I realized that this idea of new and new beginnings is quite related to the topic of our podcast today. Some may be starting new jobs, some may be starting new semesters in their studies, and some may be taking new roles in their life, whether it's a new position at work, or maybe it's an actually different role that they've never been, like new parents, people who are going to have babies for the very first time, or maybe even the second time or the third time, as each birth is a new beginning, a new adventure within their role of parenthood. I will never forget the first time that I watched a live vaginal birth during my maternity clinical rotations back in nursing school. Despite the unimaginable pain and labor that the mom went through, you could just sense and see that unconditional love right when the baby was born, and it was just one of the most magical and most beautiful things I've ever seen. I then remember that we saw that baby getting their first physical assessment with the pediatrician in another room. And then we were talking with the nurses about the plans for the mom's discharge along with the baby, with all of the education, all of the postpartum care. But we also saw that this is not the case for all new parents. We also rotated many times in the NICU, or the neonatal intensive care unit, where we saw babies who could not go home right away with their parents because either they were born too early or prematurely, which is usually defined as any time before 37 weeks of pregnancy and may need more medical support in the hospital, or even babies who are born overdue, which is usually defined as anything after 42 weeks of pregnancy. And also for other indications, we saw babies who came out of other complicated births, or those who have birth defects, or the more accepted term now, which is congenital anomalies. This episode was actually live recorded back in January of 2022, which is designated to be National Birth Defects Month, and we wanted to raise awareness on it. Before I introduce my guest, I just wanted to share the tidbits of my most favorite memories that I cannot forget during my rotations in the NICU as a nursing student. I remember getting this tiny diaper that I still have in my closet until now. It was just the cutest thing ever. I also remember doing a heel stick on the baby for the very first time, and I believe that it was for the PKU test or for phenylketonuria, and it was a heel stick, and I was afraid. I was just the most scared person at that moment. I remember trying to gently grab the baby's foot, and then there's just like, you gotta hold on a little bit harder. And so I did, and then I started to stick the foot, and we had to get the blood, and the baby started to cry, and I just felt so bad. And I'm like, am I breaking the baby's foot? Am I hurting the baby? It was just one of the most heartbreaking things ever, and I never wanted to do it ever again. And one last memory, because I will never forgive the nurse. I'm just kidding. So I was instructed to listen to the heart sounds using the stethoscope of a baby in the NICU. I didn't receive any history of the baby yet. And the nurse, who was a tita, which means a Filipino nurse, the tita said, oh, the baby is a heart murmur because they have a congenital heart disease. I believe they had patent ductus arteriosus, or PDA. And I was like, okay. So I took the stethoscope and I started listening to the chest in every area that we were taught that there would be a heart sound. And I couldn't hear anything. I couldn't hear anything. And then the tita was like, oh, did you hear it? I'm like, no, not really. And the tita was like, keep listening. Do you know what a murmur sounds like? And all of a sudden I'm just like, yes, I do. And you have health assessment skills classes, which I thought I knew what a heart murmur really sounded like during that time. I kept listening, and our clinical shift was almost done. I just lied, and I was like, oh, I heard it. And then she was like, show me where you heard it. And then I put it at the apex of the heart, and I was like, that's where I think I heard it. So the tita was like, okay, let me listen. And she placed a stethoscope on the baby's chest, and she was like, I don't hear anything. It sounds normal to me. I was like, oh. And she was like, I was just kidding with you. This patient has no heart murmurs. I was just checking to see if you actually know what a murmur sounded like. The betrayal. Well, I just wanted to share that. Core memory we'll never forget. NICU. This is why I avoided the NICU. I'm just kidding. Anyways, enough about me and my NICU experiences. Let's talk about the actual NICU now. Like I was saying before, with new parents or new adventures within parenthood of those who already had babies in the past, the NICU is also a very somber place. Becoming new parents, I can't imagine that anyone would ever hope or imagine to be in a place like the NICU, which is an ICU for the neonates, for new babies. That means there is something wrong, and you have this ongoing anxiety and fear for your own baby. I remember all of the parents always asking, like, is my baby doing okay? Will they be okay? When will they go home? I just can't imagine the fear and the trepidation that they felt. Truly, there are many questions surrounding the NICU. How do we support these new parents and these babies in distress? What causes birth defects? What are the risk factors for premature birth? How do we support the families after they leave the NICU and go home, especially those with congenital anomalies that will follow them throughout their life? There was no better expert I could think of to talk to us than Dr. Kate Rubey, a board-certified neonatology physician with residency training in pediatrics, and a scientist, being a National Institute of Health funded research fellow focusing on pulmonary nanomedicine. Outside the laboratory in the hospital, Dr. Kate also generously shares her education and training in promoting evidence-based education on social media, especially on Instagram and Twitter, and also magazine and news outlets, like recently on In the Know by Yahoo, where she shared about infant health. Give it up for Dr. Kate! Hello!
How are you?
Doing good, thank you. I mean, I'm doing cold, actually, is the correct answer. Oh my gosh, is it cold there too? It's like,
It's very, very cold here.
it is freezing in here.
And the
Oh my God.
nor'easter's coming. I'm like, no.
I know. I heard there's supposed to be like a snowstorm here, like over the weekend. So we'll see how that goes. But thank you so much for being with me tonight. If you could just first please introduce yourself to everybody.
Hi, I'm Kate. I'm a neonatologist in Philadelphia, and I make educational, sometimes just lifestyle content on Instagram.
Yes, we love to see it. It's funny because I know earlier this afternoon we were venting out in our DMs about misinformation, and the sources of this misinformation are usually the people who shouldn't be talking about a certain topic. And it's actually the main reason why I started this whole series. Anyways, you're a neonatologist, you're a physician. For those who don't know, but many may know, it's a long road. 4 years of undergrad, 4 years of medical school, X amount years of residency or research if you decide to do so, and fellowship as well. Beyond all of that, it's not just the time, right? It's the effort. There's a lot of events that you probably couldn't go to. And also from your stories earlier, the amount of money involved, the amount of debt involved.
Oh, the death stories.
All your death stories that I know keeps you up at night, I can imagine. As someone who's been practicing for some time now, do you have any regrets despite of all of those time and money and effort involved?
I think it depends on the day,
Yeah,
how I feel, but a really hard transition for myself and most of the people I know that went undergraduate, like almost straight into medical school, is that all of a sudden everyone graduates from college and they have jobs and they're making money and you're still doing the same exact thing you were doing for the last 4 years. And I think that was like a hard transition to see people start like going on vacation when you don't have like an income to go on vacation and you're still studying. So there are always hard days, but now when I look back, I'm always like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this is my job. Like I get there, I can't believe this is what I do every day. Like I take care of babies. I think like anything, there are good days, there are bad days. But overall, I guess at this point, I would do it again if I had to.
Yeah, I think that would stem from passion, though, right? To go through all this journey of years and effort. Where did that inspiration come from to pursue medicine? Was there like a family member or a friend or a personal experience that you went through?
Yeah, I had a pulmonologist when I was growing up who I really liked, so maybe him, but no one in my family is a doctor, and so I didn't really know that much about it outside of like my interactions with a pediatrician. But when I was in school, I always really loved like all the science classes and stuff. Sometimes I tell people I remember in high school they made us go to this like cancer symposium. I have no idea why we were doing this as high schoolers. But they like had us do this cancer symposium and like all my friends were like reading like 17 magazine, like Cosmopolitan, like behind their like books. And I took like 15 pages of notes during it. And I was like, oh my gosh, you are a total nerd. But then I was like, also maybe this is what you want to do if you're the only person who is interested in this. And so a lot of those sort of like interest in science classes, experiences really sent me in this direction.
And there you go. You were meant to become a physician. And again, with all of those loans stacked upon each other, I think that's also a big barrier to many students who may want to pursue medicine, right? What would be your number one advice for someone who wants to pursue medicine, like beyond all of the logistics of the money and the time and stuff like that?
Yeah, I tell everyone, well, I have two, I guess, biggest pieces of advice. One is to make sure that you're just exploring anything outside of science classes, because I feel like there are so many prerequisites to like, you have to do well in this, you have to do well in that to get on the road. That sometimes people get tunnel vision. And I'm like, if you really, really want to know that medicine's for you, explore everything because either the two options are you either realize that you love something else more, or at the end of the day, you become this well-rounded person who has common experiences that you can then use to connect with your patients because no one wants to go and be treated by a robot. Either you cement, you know what you want to do and you get some really awesome skills from that, or maybe you change your mind, which is also fine too. But that's why I think it's so important to like really take every opportunity that comes to you and explore things that are not traditionally thought of as like, oh, that's pre-med, oh, that's a doctor thing. And then my other thing, just for actually getting into medical school, is volunteering is so important on an application that I always tell everyone, like, if you think you want to do this, you need to find something that interests you and start volunteering somehow with it. And especially because lots of volunteer opportunities are good, but one volunteer opportunity that lasts many years actually is something that is held in like a higher esteem, usually by an application committee. So
beyond the whole medical school application process that's so rigorous, it's medical school itself too, right? And it's 2 years of didactics and then 2 years of your clerkship, right? Rotations. I'd always have friends who'd say, oh, I'm going to medicine because I want to be an OB. And then they come out of medical school and they're psychiatrists. I think there's this ongoing thing that you really do not know what you want to be until you have gone through your rotations in medical school. As a neonatologist now, is that what you've always wanted, or is also something that you saw during rotations, like, this is what I want to do?
I actually always knew I wanted to be in pediatrics, but I originally was really interested in hematology oncology because I wanted to treat cancer patients. And just, again, like you said, through every experience I kind of learned something new, and I realized that that specialty probably was not the right fit for my interests and for, you know, kind of how I've envisioned my future work-life integration. And so then I actually was in OB-GYN, and I was like, I love that. Like, this is so weird because I know I want to do peds. And what I realized is I liked OB-GYN because I liked the baby in the delivery room. And so like they'd be like, okay, Kate, like mom needs this. And I'd be like, well, who cares what mom needs? Because there's a baby over here. And so then I really like had to sit with myself and be like, it's the baby in the room.
There you go.
Then I learned that there's a whole specialty where you can be a pediatrician who goes to deliveries and only has to worry about the baby in the deliveries. And
There
so
we go.
that's the neonatology.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, how does the path to neonatology look like? Well, obviously you just said the pediatrics residency, right? And how many years is that?
Yeah, so it's 3 years of a pediatrics residency, and then you do a pediatrics board exam to become a board certified pediatrician, and then you do 3 more years of specific fellowship training.
And that's for neonatology.
Yeah, just for neonatology. So that's like, once I graduated from residency, I was like, finally, all I have to worry about for the rest of my life is babies.
As someone with acne and blemish-prone skin, facial scarring and hyperpigmentation have always been my issues since high school. Acne has robbed me of my self-confidence throughout my schooling years, and having its visible reminders on my face to this day continues to do so. But I have found silver linings of hope having used Rescue MD's DNA Repair Complex Serum. Plastic surgeon developed, Rescue MD seeks to harness the powers of science and 2 decades of patient experience in providing a multi-benefit skin renewal serum that provides real results and improves the appearance of visible skin damage. Beyond my personal skin concerns, the serum also seeks to address a breadth of damage from varying external stressors, including hypertrophic and surgery scars, burns and chemical burns, cuts, scrapes, and bug bites. All of these are targeted by supporting the skin's natural healing process through its infusion with Rescue MD's patented LabCall, a proprietary anti-inflammatory skincare technology that targets skin damage at the DNA level. The serum also contains a hand-selected blend of other ingredients, such as peptides to help strengthen the skin, botanicals like rosehip to soothe, and moisturizing agents such as dimethicone and allantoin that helps to speed up skin recovery. The DNA Repair Complex Serum has been my daily friend, and every day, I feel like I can take back what my scars have stolen from me. Definitely, each skin is different and results are not guaranteed, but I hope that you can find your silver lining too. In partnership with Rescue MD, you can get 15% off your order on rescuemd.com with the code FOF15. The serum is also now available on bloomingdales.com. Discover what healthy skin healing means with Rescue MD. Growing up with my mom, who has been a nurse for the past 30 years, I would always take an adventure in her bookshelf filled with nursing and medical textbooks, encyclopedias, and various human anatomy posters. I still remember perusing through an encyclopedia as a 6-year-old, trying to look for pictures of eyes and muscles, attempting to pronounce their lengthy names since I could not really understand the explanations about the different body parts. Despite the myriad of children's books with topics ranging from magical universities to talking animals and the different types of rocks, there weren't really any books on the workings of the human body when I was a child, for children. Written by physicians, Dr. Betty and Dr. Brandon, the Medical School for Kids book series now provides a charming, easy-to-understand introduction to the wonders of the medical field. These books feature beautiful illustrations and simple explanations, teaching children and adults alike about the anatomy, physiology, and diseases of the body. From distinguishing a normal mole from melanoma, to discovering the importance of eating healthy food for heart health, to knowing the vital signs that are monitored in the operating room, people of all ages can truly learn something new through these books, as they are designed to teach real medical concepts to readers of all ages in ways that anyone can understand. Take an educational adventure into the intricacies of every organ system of the human body. Paperback copies of the books are available for purchase on Amazon.com and eligible for 2-day Prime delivery. Kindle versions of the books are also available on Amazon and free with Kindle Unlimited. You can also visit the website md4kids.org for more information. Get ready for an adventure on the medical school bus! Babies. But the thing is, even in the NICU, it's not just the babies that you deal with. It's still the whole parental figures, right? Or the guardians as well.
So like when I was in med school, I would be like, oh, I like kids, I don't like adults, so I'm going into peds. But yes, all of your communication is actually with adults because babies can't talk back. So
yeah, they can't talk back. They can only cry back to you for now. Okay? Someone sent in a question previously. As someone who deals with parents, and I remember for nursing school for my peds rotation, my rotation was actually in the NICU, and we'd always have parents come in, and the NICU is a very stressful situation,
yes,
especially for the parents, obviously, who's, I guess everyone's hope was their babies will go home with them and they'll start a whole new journey. But that's not what happens when they're in the NICU, right? Do you have any two stories that you will never ever forget as a physician in the NICU? Whether it's the scariest moment, the most learning moment, whether it's in rotations in medical school, residency, or now as a practicing attending?
I think that there are moments like that happen every day. There are incredible things that happen in the NICU every day, and there are things that are devastating that happen with more frequency than I personally would like. But like the thing that usually sticks with me is that I think it's such a privilege to like be let into people's families in this way, because like you said, no one's birth plan is like, and then we'll go to the NICU. So it is like a very life-changing, frame-shifting like time for anyone who ends up there, even if it's a short period of time. And to be able to be the person that can like give the guidance, have the knowledge, like work with the parents as a team for the baby. I just like think it's like such a nice place of trust to be able to like be with people. That's one of the things that I always think about. Like it's crazy that like there's so many people, right, that go to work and like are a lawyer or a businessman and they just like sit behind a desk all day. These people are like letting me into their essential like family like units to make some of the biggest decisions they'll ever make in their whole life. So it is like a really special place to work.
Yeah, for sure. I can imagine how immeasurable the memories and the experiences are, especially in the NICU. And you're right about the whole family unit thing. Like for those X amount of time, whether it's weeks or months that they're in the NICU, like you're the one making the plans with. It's like you're a third parent in that situation, right? Making the executive decisions for these babies. One special thing about our live this month, and that I was really hoping that we'd have a live this month, is because it's National Birth Defects Prevention Month. I think the common misconception too is that birth defects just happen within the NICU or just within birth, but people tend to forget that it goes on throughout outside the hospital, and then when they become kids and then become teenagers and then when into adulthood, right? But it all starts in your care and in your specialty, and you see all of this. And just for those who don't know, like how would you define linguistically even just what a birth defect is?
I actually looked this up. For the CDC official definition is just changes in the body structure and function, and that can affect the way the body works or the way the body looks, and they're considered congenital or birth as long as they're present when the baby is born.
There's a whole range of birth defects, right?
They can affect basically any body system.
Any body system. Yeah, I remember having like newborn babies with kidney agenesis who didn't have kidneys at all, or a lot of the cardiac septal defects and stuff like that. What are the most common birth defects would you say that you see in your service in the NICU?
Yeah, I think by the numbers, congenital birth defects are probably the most common. I actually work in a center that has a perinatal like diagnosis and delivery center. So we see a lot of like birth, anomalies that are probably not seen very commonly in the general population. But some of the things that we see a lot of myelomeningeal seals, which is the spinal cord defects that babies can have. And we also see a lot of congenital diaphragmatic hernias, which is like the diaphragm is the muscle that helps you breathe in your chest, and it can have a hole in it, and then whatever's in your belly, like your stomach, your liver, your intestines, all end up in the chest, which is a problem for the lung development. So we see a lot of that as well. I mean, there are so many different things that you could be, born with your intestines outside of your abdomen, and there's lots of things. So it's nice because there is a wide variety of the things.
Do you work like in a teaching unit, like a teaching hospital?
Yeah, we have a medical school and a residence.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, I guess it's a good experience for those students and residents then to see like a spectrum of all of these things. Despite how interesting they are, like I can just imagine also how sad it is, right? Especially for parents.
An interesting thing about a lot
Yeah.
of congenital things that we see now is that many of them can be prenatally
Yeah.
diagnosed because
Yeah.
ultrasound
Yeah.
has gotten so good. So in a lot of ways, the babies that have congenital diagnosis, like their parents have a lead time
Mm,
to
mhm,
like wrap their head around like what
mhm.
that means, what they're
Yeah.
expecting. So it's almost an easier transition sometimes for,
Mm,
obviously I can't speak for everybody, but
yeah.
sometimes for them versus like the parents that have premature babies, because like
Mhm.
one day you wake up and in the morning you are having a healthy baby pregnancy, and then like
Yeah.
10 hours later all of a sudden you have
Yeah.
like a 24-week baby who like no one really can give you like a good crystal ball on what the end
Yeah.
result of that is going to look
Yeah.
like for you. So some of the congenital anomalies are a little bit easier to kind of get ready for.
Yeah, yeah. Beyond the NICU, though, let's say family supported, like once the baby leaves the unit. From earlier, some of these birth defects, though known, even like prenatally, some of them can live through it, right? They can live their whole life with the defect. Are there support systems that, let's say, you as a physician or the team gives for someone who's leaving the NICU and has a birth defect?
I think it depends on what exactly the birth defect is, because some babies will live their whole life without like really
Yeah,
realizing
yeah,
that
yeah,
happened.
yeah.
Some are going to need a lot of follow up with their
Hmm.
general pediatrician. So we always make sure the pediatrician knows like everything that happened so that they're all set up before they leave with their pediatrician. Some babies are going to need lots of subspecialist follow-ups. So like
Hmm.
for the babies that have cardiac problems, like we'll make sure everything's set up with their cardiologist. And then some babies have things that are going to need multiple people. And so
Hmm.
we now have a lot of like these multidisciplinary clinics where if
Hmm.
like based on what they had, they're going to need a surgeon, they're going to need a pulmonologist. Like they
Hmm.
now have their own clinic where it's
Hmm.
like they go to one appointment and all those people are there. And then most of the babies who are in the NICU actually get something called NICU follow-up clinic. And so that is a neonatologist who does outpatient medicine. And they're usually joined by psychologists who can do a lot of the developmental testing and some general pediatricians. And so that clinic is really good for watching NICU babies for very NICU specific, like expected possible outcomes that may not be as familiar to a general pediatrician who will like probably only have one
Yeah,
patient with that in their whole
yeah,
career. So that's why we make sure they're always well set up with
yeah,
whatever follow-up they need and like hooked in with everybody. And we do our best like throughout a whole
yeah,
hospitalization to try to give families an idea of like what the expectations are within the realms of like we don't know everything, and all of this is based on numbers and what's most
yeah,
common, but like
yeah,
we try to give a little bit of a roadmap if we
yeah,
have one,
yeah,
so
yeah.
that they kind of know like what to expect as the baby gets older.
Yeah, I mean, even with those expectations support, I can't imagine how heavy it is for the parents or the guardians of these babies, though, right? Even beyond like birth defects, there's also many other reasons and diagnoses why these babies are in the NICU, right? Many would call it sad, but you're like the mediator of all of that, right? Beyond just the medical and the clinical responsibilities. I mean, NICU is an ICU. There's a lot of psychosocial aspect in the unit that takes place, like so much heavy emotions. How do you manage that as the physician? You're the one who is taking care of all of this, making all these executive decisions. The parents are looking to you, and I can imagine parents are fretful and afraid and worried. How do you manage all of that?
That's like a very interesting thing that actually no one ever teaches you in medical
Yeah,
school. You are
right.
kind of like
Yeah,
the emotional leader
yeah,
for the team,
yeah.
which is a weird space to be in sometimes when
Mm,
you are processing your own emotions and
mhm,
then you're also trying to, process your team's emotions for them with them. Doesn't work for everybody. I really lean on humor. I'm a little
mm,
bit silly, a little bit goofy. So I like try to tell a lot of jokes like in the times when we can, obviously in the middle of a very serious situation. We're not telling the jokes then, but when we're all back in the team room and trying to debrief, like finding not things about the situation to laugh about, but things that you can laugh about afterwards. And a lot of it, I think, is just like a group processing. Like we often all find ourselves in a room talking about what happened. And specifically with parents, it's a lot of just open listening. And that's really what I learned during my fellowship is like when people are going through these very stressful moments, the best thing you can do is give them silence because it gives them space to think about their emotions and their feelings and then have the opportunity to bring them up to you, which if you talk a lot, then that never happens. And so it's a lot of like using silence as a way to, let everyone be able to have their thoughts and their feelings heard.
Yeah, because I was talking to a previous guest once, who's a pediatrician, and I was saying how parents already have like their preconceived notions of what's best for their kids, right? And then we have the physician or the team here, like from a medical or clinical aspect, is saying this is what's best for the kid now. And I feel like it's so hard to mesh that all together, right? Or is that hard at all?
Yeah, I think it depends on the situation because there are things that are obviously like a standard of care or obviously recommended. But in the NICU, there's actually a lot of things where it's like these are like the two roads and I can't tell you which road to go down because my value of what a family life looks like, what your time looks like it doesn't matter because it's not my baby. So like that only matters if it's my kid. So there's a lot of time that we spend exploring with parents, like what are your like goals for your baby, like what are your fears, what is if you when you look and think about them as a 5-year-old, like what do you envision for them, what do you want, because people have different things that they value. And so it's more of exploring together what that specific family's like thoughts, needs, feelings are, and then saying like these are your options and you think about which one aligns best with like what you're hoping for.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely is a journey.
NICU is a journey, and it's frequently a not straight journey. There's a lot of ups, there's downs. We're on a roller coaster sometimes.
For sure. I mean, I can just imagine like good baby, such a sensitive stage, right? It's such a sensitive space. I mean, besides the premature babies, even like the non-preemies, but there's so many things going on. It is such a sensitive space. Are there some times where you're like, oh my gosh, there's this kind of baby and it's literally like a roadmap to get to the root of what's going on, right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the babies that I see are not very straightforward. And they take a lot of time, a lot of effort. We do a lot of group thinking, even with our attending group, where we like people will just like sit down with like 3 or 4 other attendings who are all nervous and be like, listen, this is what's happening. Like, what do you think? Like, what? It's the art of medicine. There is evidence-based options, obviously, but every baby is different. And so there's always like the decision points that you come to where you're like, there's no clear-cut answer. So what does everyone else think? Like, I'm always like, I need to phone a friend. I need to pull the audience.
Phone a friend, call an audience, call another attending. Yeah, I think it's a good thing with healthcare, right? And medicine specifically is how you can just like collaborate and ask for help when needed. Also, because like it's always a learning moment. You always learn something new every day. And the hospital that I worked at, like even attendings would say, oh yeah, I learned something new every single day. And I think it's the beauty with our field, right? With healthcare. And I think it's also about being open to learning as well. And like you said, evidence-based data. And I just can't forget about our conversation earlier this afternoon. It's usually those who have no background in science or medicine who have the most to say about a specific topic. But speaking of science, you are a scientist, and I know you're working on research. Can you talk more about that, Doc?
Yeah, so I actually spend 80% of my time in a lab, so I'm mostly a scientist. But right now I'm doing a project that's trying to use nanoparticles as like a drug delivery device or system, you could say, to immune cells as a way to, kind of change the way that we use our immune cells, the way they, treat, or the way they like attack infections. And so there's a lot of like different, this is another thing, like there's a million avenues to go down, and I'm just like slowly like ticking my way through. Like every time I find one thing out, then that means I need to like do another experiment, find something else out. So it's still a little bit fluid about what the project will look like in the end. But that's kind of like the gist of it.
All throughout high school and bouts of college, I suffered from severe acne. I cried almost every day looking at the mirror. I wore hoodies during the summer to hide my cheeks. When my mom asked me what I wanted for my birthday, all I wished for was a visit to the dermatologist. I tried so many products and saw so many estheticians, physicians, and other advanced providers. But I know that my mere access to these products and providers is a privilege. Many who suffer from acne and other skin conditions live in many underserved populations where access to dermatology specialists can be difficult due to limited resources. To help bridge this divide, Ben Abadia, a dermatology nurse practitioner, recently launched Your Skincare Expert's Derm course, which can allow other specialties to provide comprehensive care to patients through dermatology in places where access may be limited. The course can also be used to help better train extended providers within the field of dermatology to feel confident and empowered in their knowledge. From fortifying skin anatomy to identifying skin types and concerns, breaking down acne, building skincare routines, and going over active ingredients, the course seeks to further knowledge on skincare, anti-aging, acne, and overall holistic skin health. Friends of Franz is partnering with Your Skincare Expert so that you can get 10% of the course with the code FRANZ, that's FRANZ, or visit yourskincareexpert.com/Franz. My skin and my life were changed by the right products and the right people. Through this course, I hope that this would also be made possible for others. Anyone who knows me knows that I love boba. After a heavy dinner? No problem. I have a second stomach for boba, and sometimes even a third. But each cup of bubble tea is definitely a guilty pleasure, given that the average cafe-made milk tea has over 100 calories per serving, over 20 grams of high glycemic sugar, and is packed with artificial flavors. I am so glad that the guilty days are over with Twirl, the world's first canned, plant-based milk tea. With only 45 to 50 calories per serving, and containing 6 to 7 grams of sugar, and low glycemic sweeteners at that, goodbye to sugar crash, Twirl is made with pea milk, the most sustainable plant-based milk on the market, regenerating the soil where it comes from. This is thanks to the fact that fair trade and organic are the names of the game, as the teas are sourced from biodiverse family farms in China, Japan, and Taiwan that practice sustainable farming techniques. No artificial flavors are ever used. Choose from 3 antioxidant flavors of the chocolatey Taiwan-style black milk tea, floral jasmine, and nutty hojicha. Enjoy all of these flavors, each being nitro-infused that you can feel and hear their fresh, silky, and creamy texture with each pop of the can. Let's enjoy tasty, creamy, shelf-stable, and healthy milk tea together for 10% off using the code FRANZ10. That's FRANZ10. Now available on twirlmilktea.com or Amazon. Twirl around in its goodness.
You know, the healthcare system recently has been very under hot water and hot fire because many say that it's crumbling down, many say that it's very abusive field where everyone's taken for granted. I guess beyond the suggestions and recommendations for applications and stuff like that, for like a very personal field, do you think that healthcare is still a field worth it getting into for those students and those who's always wanted to be in medicine?
I think there are still plenty of places where healthcare and medicine can definitely improve. I do think that things are even better than when I was in med school. So, sometimes it's hard because you're like, this is such an old institution. Like it's hard to change those things when a culture is so entrenched, but the changes are happening. So I feel like hopeful that things will continue to get better. It is a hard space, especially for specifically medical school training and residency, where people need to be supported to have mental health help and support as they need it, and have time outside of the hospital, but also at the end of the day, at some point, you're alone taking care of someone else's life. So there is this hard balance between making sure that people are becoming proficient in their training and making sure that we're also supporting them and not like ruining their whole lives while we're
Yeah.
doing that. I don't think we know the answer to that yet. You know, I think people are trying, and sometimes we're almost swinging too far in the opposite direction. But I am hopeful that as more people become advocates for having some sort of work-life integration that is actually like something that supports happy and healthy physicians, that will get closer to it. And you know, like I said, there's like things, you know, I think about all the time, like, oh gosh, I have to like work on the holidays. I hate that. But I like know so many other people that do things that are working on holidays. And when I think about what they're doing, I'm like, I don't want to do that. And so like they're like the things that sometimes I get like meh about. And like at least at the end of the day, like I go to work and I get to see a million babies. And like sometimes I literally save a baby's life, which sounds so dramatic, but it's my friends are like make fun of me because they're like, but you actually do that. And I'm like, I know, but it sounds so like weird to be like, I literally saved someone's life. But I mean, that's what happens in the NICU.
And that's the amazing thing with you as working as a neonatologist. Like, you're literally securing the lives of someone who live their own life and become an adult someday, right? And have their own life stories, which is amazing. And I love what you said about the whole change in the medical world too. I mean, I was talking to an attending the other day, and she was like, "Oh, you know, the hours have changed so much for residency. There's like, at least now there's a cap for 80 hours." So when I was a resident, there was no such thing. Just that you will work until you work, and I think that's also something that what's not talked about though, especially in these times, that's actually very prevalent despite not talking about, is the rate of physician suicide, right? Especially those in residency. And I think that's where you were talking about the aspect of mental health is so important. I think there really must be a push for not only changes within the medical system, but also like inspiring people to have a life outside medicine, right? To have decompression methods, or I guess it depends on what specialist you are or what branch of medicine you are. It sometimes you do bring homework, right? And it's sometimes not just like the physical clinical work, but also like the emotional toll on it. For you, how do you decompress out of work, out of medicine?
Yeah, I like to stay busy, which I think anyone who has followed my Instagram will probably realize. I plan all sorts of, as long as you know my shift means that I'll get to it. Like I plan all sorts of events. You know, I like to go out to dinner with friends. I like to learn, you know, do classes, learn new skills, cooking classes. You know, like jewelry making. I made some coasters last year. Like there's a long list of things that I will try just to do. And sleep. I like I've never slept more in my life than I do now. But I think after, you know, 6 years of like what happens to your sleep cycle, training, and then you really appreciate like sleep. I feel it's not like resting. I feel like it's an active like activity for me. Like I need to rest, and I'm better after I rest. So now I'm like, I love to sleep. Like I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, you're wasting time if you're sleeping. I'm like, I could sleep all day at this point.
You can sleep. I mean, you spent the past few years of your life not sleeping for residency, right? And training. And one thing we have in common is we love sweets and dessert. Is what I know.
I love dessert.
Oh my gosh, there's always so I went out to lunch earlier with a friend, and we literally ate like a lot. And I was like, "Oh, you want to get dessert?" And she was like, do you have space for that?" I was like, "There's a separate stomach for dessert."
Dessert stomach, right? Of course, everyone knows that.
do you bake then, or do you make your own?
Oh my! I like you before residency. I was like I made these like fancy cupcakes all the time. I like made the sugar cookies, you know, that people decorated, and I didn't have time in residency, and now I live in such a small apartment that I don't like have space for baking ingredients or goods. So I mostly just enjoy other people's desserts at this point. But baking also is another, or cooking in general, if you like cooking, although then you have to like clean a lot, which but that's like another good stress reliever too. So yeah, now I love eating dessert and ice cream. I love it.
Oh my god! Except that you only also have a spoonful, right?
Well, I mean everything that you do, you need to have moderation, right? Like you can't eat a whole pint of ice cream every night and be healthy. So like
Yeah.
if I just have one spoon, I can like tell myself I'm still beat.
Me too. I am the same exact way. And also me like with the chip, honestly.
I don't know how you eat one chip. I don't know how you do
I
that.
don't know. I just see the bag and I'm like, this is so much sodium. I'll just have one chip, and that does it for me. I mean, sometimes maybe two or three, but mostly one. I learned so much today, not only about birth defect month, and I think it's just so important to have awareness for it, not just for expecting parents or also just for the general public, right? I think social media is the land of misinformation and disinformation.
It has the power for so much good, and it
Yes.
sometimes misses the mark.
Yes, like it has all the potential to be so great, to be so good, and to be so factual and evidence based. But for the most part, it is not. But we have people like you who are propagating sound and evidence based information, and thank you for that. And another a big reason too of why I made this podcast was the last part we talked about is having a life outside medicine. I think so many times physicians and other practitioners are lumped in this prim and proper role of just solely in their scrubs, solely in their white coat, right? Like,
All
no,
all the time.
yeah, it's like there's no life outside of medicine. They're just doctor. They're just an NP or a PA or a nurse. That they can't have fun. But as I have been interviewing so many physicians and NPs and physical therapists and dentists, it's like we do have a life, right? Like we do enjoy life too. And I think it's so important to have that decompression out of work because of the whole mental health aspect that we talked about too. And thank you so much again for giving us your time tonight and your experience. And I hope you have a great and warm rest of the night.
See how it goes.
Thank you so much. Good night.
Bye.
We have now reached the end of the story. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Friends of Franz. I hope you had an enjoyable adventure learning about our expert guest, their work, and why they do the things that they do. Please check out the rest of the series available on all podcast platforms. Please also consider following the podcast on the platform that you prefer, turn on the alerts for new episodes so you don't miss new stories, and give us a rating to support the show. You can find more updates on the podcast's official Instagram at Friends of Franz Pod, or my personal Instagram at Chris Franz. That's without the I, because there is no I in team. I'm kidding. Someone already took the username. Have a great day or night, everybody!